We begin, of course, with the latest on the Omicron coronavirus variant this morning.
Public health officials are pushing for more people to get vaccinated and for those who are already vaccinated to get their boosters. The CDC is going so far as to strengthen its guidance on booster shots, telling all Americans to get another dose if they're 6 months out from their second dose or if it's been 2 months since their Johnson & Johnson shot. Right now, more than Go ahead.
More than a dozen countries have confirmed cases, and new this morning, Dutch health officials now say the Omicron strain has been there for 11 days, well before the variant was confirmed by health officials in southern Africa. So far, the United States doesn't have any confirmed cases, but public health experts warn it's probably already here. There's still a lot to learn about this variant, but here's what we do know and don't know yet. The World Health Organization says it poses a very high global risk. A South African doctor says so far symptoms appear to be mild, but that hasn't stopped countries, including the U.S., from banning travel to and from the region.
Right now, researchers are still trying to figure out how quickly Omicron is spreading, its strength, and if the current vaccines hold up against it. Questions they hope to answer soon. In a speech yesterday, President Biden said Omicron is a cause for concern, but not a reason to panic.
Sooner or later, we're going to see cases of this new variant here in the United States. We'll have to face this new threat just as we faced those that come before. And we'll fight this variant with scientific and knowledgeable actions and speed, not chaos and confusion.
We have team coverage of the Omicron variant this morning to walk you through all the latest developments and what doctors are learning about this new strain and what they hope to learn. Let's begin with MSNBC anchor Lindsay Reiser outside a COVID testing site in New York's Times Square. So, Lindsay, still a lot of officials are still learning about this new strain while we wait for information. Some places are taking precautionary steps. For example, where you are in New York, how's the state preparing?
Joe, Savannah, good morning. Good to be with both of you. So we know that the Omicron variant was declared a variant of concern by the WHO on November 26th on Friday. And you're asking, what is New York doing to prepare? Well, on that same day, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, declared a state of emergency ahead of a potential spike in cases. So what exactly does that mean? It frees up potential supplies in case of a shortage. It could address hospital staffing shortages, and also the executive order, which goes into effect on December 3rd, this Friday, limits non-emergency surgeries. Again, all in preparation, trying to make sure the hospital system doesn't get overwhelmed here. And this is all precautionary because there are no confirmed cases right now of the Omicron variant. But Savannah, Joe, you both just mentioned that health experts say it's likely already here. We do know that the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, said it's coming. The New York City Health Commissioner believes it's just a matter of days before the first cases are confirmed here in New York City. So just yesterday, we heard from New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio about a new mask advisory. Let's listen to what he said about that, and also the New York City Health Commissioner.
There's a lot of places that have that right to say, if you're coming into our establishment, you got to wear a mask, and we've always respected that. And I think New Yorkers overwhelmingly follow that guidance.
This strengthens our recommendation around masking, particularly indoors. And to clarify, that is for everyone, regardless of vaccination status.
So right now, Joe and Savannah, it is required to wear masks on public transit, in congregate settings. Anecdotally, a lot of people still are wearing masks indoors, in lobbies, in grocery stores, things like that. But this is just another warning to not let your guard down at this point. Joe and Savannah.
I mean, Lindsay, we've been talking about how health officials say right now the best defense against the Omicron variant is getting vaccinated. So how are vaccinations going in New York City, and how does that compare to the rest of the country?
Yeah, so right now, let's start with the country, the umbrella view here. We've got about 59% of Americans of all ages who are fully vaccinated. And in New York City, that number does jump up to 69%. So it is higher than the national average. Again, all ages fully vaccinated. And anecdotally, also, you go to the pharmacy, you do see people waiting in line for their booster shots. But definitely, health officials are really trying to get that word out and encourage not just boosters, but definitely people who have yet to be fully vaccinated. Joe, Savannah.
And Lindsay, New York State had already seen a rise in cases before the Omicron variant was even identified. So how do officials feel about the numbers right now, especially compared to where we were this time last year entering the holidays?
So they do feel better about where we are. I mean, think about it. Last year, most of us weren't traveling for the holidays, weren't spending time with our loved ones. This year, that definitely was different. We know that TSA checkpoints pre-pandemic levels of travelers going through. And we also know last year in December, the vaccine wasn't widely available. Only about 1% of Americans were fully vaccinated. It was really only open at that point to healthcare officials, people in really high-risk jobs. And so health officials do say, just like you guys played from the president yesterday, reason for concern, not panic. We are in a better spot today. We have therapeutics. And again, we have that vaccine, and now we have boosters.
Lindsay Reiser in Times Square. Lindsay, thank you.
A lot of questions about this new variant. Let's bring in Dr. Amish Adalja. He's a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Doctor, good morning. Always great to have you. So, I mean, this feels like deja vu. States like New York are canceling elective surgeries. There's still so much, though, that we don't know about this variant yet. How transmissible is it? How do our vaccinations work against it? And those types of things. What kind of measures do you think states should take in preparation? Is there a risk of going too far while we still learn more?
There definitely is a risk of going too far, and I think that happened during the early days of the pandemic when hospitals canceled non-emergency surgeries, and we all paid for it as other conditions kind of languished because hospitals were unable to perform those surgeries. So I think what we know now is that there are a lot more questions than there are answers, but we know that this isn't March of 2020. This is November of 2021, and we have vaccines. And even if this variant is able to get around some of that protection, it's unlikely to be able to erase everything vaccines do for us, prevent serious disease, hospitalization, and death. We've got lots of diagnostic tests. We can test this, we can track it, we can trace it. All of that's going to be really important. But I think we have to take a step back and realize that we have tools now that we didn't have. And we have to think about this differently than we did in the past and not overdo it, but also take this very seriously and get these questions answered as soon as possible.
So let's, of course, talk more about the shots. So we are getting clear guidance from the CDC now that's encouraging all Americans to get that booster shot. And so far, more than 40 million Americans have received that dose. So if you already got your booster, what's the risk here of getting the Omicron variant? Do we have any idea? And do we think that there could be a tweaked vaccine that gets more at this particular variant?
Based on the mutations that the Omicron variant has, and these are mutations we've seen already in the Beta and the Gamma variant, it's likely that breakthrough infections are more common with Omicron than they were with Delta or Alpha or any of the other variants. So it's unclear how much that booster is going to protect you against a breakthrough infection, but in general, the vaccine is likely to protect you against serious illness. And that's what we're already seeing from South Africa in this early data, that the people that are getting hospitalized tend to be those who are not vaccinated, which is good news because that's what we want the vaccine ultimately to do, prevent serious disease. There is likely going to be a need with this variant to maybe tweak this vaccine to make it more specific to Omicron. We haven't crossed that threshold for any of the other variants, but this might be one in which that threshold is crossed. And that may take about 100 days or so based on the mRNA vaccines to update them. And that's really, really great because that's very, very fast, much faster than you would have with the traditional approach.
And Doctor, quickly before I let you go, one other question with some booster news here. Pfizer plans to ask for the FDA to authorize its booster shot for 16 to 17-year-olds. Anything here parents need to know?
This is something I think is going to go through the process. Remember, 16 and 17-year-olds are generally spared from severe consequences of disease. Those that are fully vaccinated are probably not at high risk for anything unless they have an immunosuppressing condition. So this is something where there's going to be a risk-benefit calculation. There's going to be a lot of discussion. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that 16 to 17-year-olds need a booster vaccination, but we'll see how they all how the process plays out.
Dr. Adalja, it's always great to see you. Thank you so much.
As you've heard, some of the first alarm bells about Omicron came from South Africa. Scientists there quickly identified the new variant after seeing a COVID surge in an area where cases had dropped off.
NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel spoke with one of those scientists. Here's his report.
Gauteng province, which surrounds Johannesburg, is South Africa's most populous district. And it's what's happening here that's triggered alarm in South Africa and now around the world. We've been following Gauteng for over a year, a district of poor townships. Only 24% of South Africa's population is fully vaccinated. Gauteng has been hit by wave after wave of COVID. Cases had dropped off recently because people had already been infected or been vaccinated. Then along came Omicron. Dr. Richard LESSELLS is one of the first scientists to study the new variant's genetics.
This is all happening very recently. 3 weeks ago in Gauteng province, the case numbers were around 100. Now they're kind of 2,000, 3,000. We've seen this very rapid rise.
What is it about this variant that worries you?
what we've seen is this kind of very rapid rise in infections. And we've seen that in a part of the country, in a population where we thought that people had a lot of immunity. And the fact that this virus is now spreading so rapidly and so easily, it seems, it's a highly transmissible variant, but also that it may well be able to better get around some of the levels of our immune protection.
Cases across South Africa are up 63% since the start of November. Omicron, it seems, is a bee that can sting twice. We still don't know how badly. Anecdotally, doctors and nurses describe symptoms as flu-like. But many of the cases detected so far here are in young people, expected to be mild anyway. And they've been found early. And there's always a lag for symptoms to begin. That lag could mean as quickly as this variant was spotted, it could already be everywhere.
I expect over the course of this week, we're just going to see the number of countries reporting cases rising.
How likely would you say it is that there are already cases in the United States?
Very likely.
In South Africa, scientists say they are still able to accurately test for the Omicron variant, even though it has mutated, using PCR tests. But PCR tests are more expensive. They can take up to 24 hours to produce a result. They are still checking the effectiveness of the rapid antigen tests, which can produce results in just minutes. Joe, Savannah?
Richard Engel, thank you so much.
Today, an appeals court will hear arguments on whether the National Archives should turn over former President Donald Trump's records related to the January 6th Capitol attack. You might remember a judge had previously ordered the archives to hand over the material to the House committee investigating the insurrection, but the appeals court granted a brief stay to take a longer look at the issue. Here to break down exactly what's at stake is NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delaney. And Ken, good morning to you. So the appeals court says it's not even sure it has standing to hear this case. What's their concern? What kind of impact could that have on how things play out?
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, that was an interesting wrinkle. When the court agreed to take the case, it notified the Trump side that it should be prepared to argue this question of whether the court even has standing, because there's a provision in the Presidential Records Act which appears to say that the decision by the archivist to hand over the records is not subject to judicial review. Now, that really wasn't an issue in the lower courts, and it may not be relevant, but it's just another hurdle in a case where it really does appear that the law is against Trump here. This is really unprecedented. We're going to make new law because there's never been a disagreement between a former president and a sitting president over the question of executive privilege. And so far, the courts have ruled that the sitting president has the say on this. And so we'll just have to see what happens.
So, Ken, what kind of documents are the committee looking for, and what is the former president saying about this case?
So we're talking about around 750 pages of presidential diaries, schedules, call logs, emails, draft speeches, all of which the committee says may shed light on what Donald Trump was doing and saying in the days before January 6th. The Trump side says that these are protected by executive privilege, that presidents have a right to shield documents where they're getting confidential advice from their advisors, and that this is an important constitutional principle. But President Biden has said that these documents are not covered by executive privilege and has said that they're important for the committee to see, Joe.
Ken, when can we expect a ruling? And if the court does decide the former president's records should be turned over to the committee, what happens next? Would anyone be able to see them?
I think we can expect a ruling fairly soon, but Trump will almost certainly appeal this to the Supreme Court if it goes against him. But then ultimately, if the committee does get the records, they're not going to make them public, at least initially. They're going to go into their massive report, which we expect to be out in the spring, and we may see some excerpts from these records, and we hope that the committee can shed a lot of light on what happened leading up to January 6th, Joe.
And Delaney and Ken, thank you so much.
You bet.
Now to Minneapolis, where another criminal case will soon get underway. Jury selection is set to begin today in the trial of Kim Potter, a former Brooklyn Center, Minnesota police officer who shot and killed a 20-year-old black man, Daunte Wright, during a traffic stop last April. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster is outside the courthouse for us this morning. Shaq, good morning. First of all, thanks for being up early and out there in the cold for us. So walk us through what happened that day, the moments leading up to Wright's death, and the charges Potter is facing. Just remind us what happened there.
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. And this was a shooting that actually happened as we were in Minneapolis covering the trial of Derek Chauvin, the officer who was accused and then convicted of murdering George Floyd. And it happened in April of last year, and police stopped 20-year-old Daunte Wright because they said he had expired tags and an item dangling from his rearview mirror. After initially complying with officers when they asked him to step out the car when they realized he had a warrant out for his arrest, he then got back in the car. This is all captured on video, and we warn you, the video is disturbing. Now, the video is hard to hear, but you hear the officer, Kim Potter, say taser, taser, taser before firing a single shot into that 20-year-old, eventually killing him. She is now facing 2 charges, first-degree and second-degree manslaughter that carries up to 15 years in prison if she is convicted, although with sentencing guidelines here, it's unlikely she would face that even if she was found guilty. Of course, jury selection starts today. They're looking to find 12 jurors and 2 alternates for the trial that will begin with those opening statements on December 8th.
So Wright's family held a press conference just yesterday. How are they feeling ahead of jury selection and the start of this trial?
You know, it's definitely hard. They expressed the pain that they've been going through over the past couple of months since they lost Daunte back in April. One thing that we did hear was from the family attorney, and he made an interesting connection to a trial that we saw here in the Minneapolis area a couple of years ago with Mohammed Noor, a black officer who shot an Australian national. He said it was also a mistake. That's a defense that you're hearing from Kim Potter, as according to the court filings that we've seen so far. And the family attorney is saying if that officer was able to be convicted, Kim Potter should also be convicted. Listen to a little bit of what we heard at that presser.
And the question is, are we prepared to hold a white officer accountable for killing a young black man when he says, or when she says, it was an accident, which obviously we dispute, and the Attorney General's office has done an excellent job of laying out why this is not some mere accident. So we're going to learn a lot about ourselves.
According to those court filings, the defense for Kim Potter, again, is that this was an innocent mistake that was made, that it was somewhat in the heat of the moment, and that she tried to use her taser and instead had a handgun. Savannah?
And Shaq, yesterday we also heard from George Floyd's girlfriend, and it just so happens she was Daunte's former teacher. Floyd, of course, was murdered, and that was just 11 miles away from where Daunte died only a year earlier. What did she have to say?
Yeah, that overlap is incredible. The fact that Courtney Ross, she was the key witness during the Chauvin trial, was the spark of life witness that spoke of George Floyd and the kind of person that he was. Well, she actually was the teacher, as you mentioned, of Daunte Wright at one point. Listen to a little bit of what we heard from her.
Kim Potter was seen as a senior officer, an officer that trained new cadets, a trainer who claimed to not know the difference between a taser and a gun. There is no excuse for her incompetence when it comes to people's lives that are at stake. Personally, it makes no sense to me, and I believe it is a lie. I believe Kim Potter has profiled black people in Brooklyn Center for a long time and finally lost her temper and murdered Daunte Wright.
You really get the sense of how closely this trial will be watched. We do know that last night the Brooklyn Center City Council got together and they actually denied, they didn't approve a measure to have a curfew the day the verdict is read. We'll see what happens and if that changes, but this is definitely something that many people will be watching, Savannah.
Yeah, it sure is, and we know you'll be on it for us, Shaq. Thank you so much.
Time for a check on your morning news now weather.
Which means it's time for Bill Cairns to join us. Hi, Bill. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. So many times we show you pictures and stories of the fires in the west, but we actually have a pretty significant fire in the east. It's been very dry. It's been very windy. Fire conditions, even though we're heading towards the winter season, are still ripe. And this is the Grindstone Fire. This is in the mountains of North Carolina. And this fire is on state park land. It's pretty much engulfed all of Pilot Mountain and about 900 acres. It has not made its way down towards the town or any structures, but it still has not been contained. They are bringing aircraft in to fight that blaze, and there's a fire ban in all of North Carolina because of how dry it's been lately. So let's get to the weather maps. There's not a lot of huge stories out there, thankfully. We have a little bit of light snow that's greeting people as you head out the door this morning. It snowed overnight in Detroit and Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and now that's making its way through Pennsylvania. May see a couple snowflakes early today from D.C. to Philly to Baltimore, even New York, and also areas in the Northeast. But we're not expecting a lot of snow out of this, just a coating in Pennsylvania. And the story out west, guys, continues to be this incredible western warmth. Temperatures still 10 to 20, even 30 degrees warmer than they should be for this time of year. I mean, Bismarck tomorrow is going to be 60 degrees. I mean, they put the shorts and T-shirts away long ago. But for 60 in North Dakota, break them back out.
Wow, 30 degrees above average. It's amazing. All right.
That really is. Thank you, Bill. See you next hour.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.